Greetings, Maryland Realtors members. My name is James Beslity, and I'm an Associate Legal Counsel in the Legal Affairs Department at your state association. I'm here today to talk to you about January 2023 updates to our statewide forms library. Now, for January, we have a few minor adjustments to some of the language of some of our forms, as well as some clerical changes that we've made to a number of other forms. So let's jump right in. I'm going to go ahead and share the documents that we'll be discussing today, starting off with our statewide form summary of changes and practice tips for 2023. And as you can see, as we do for every statewide forms update, we've gone ahead and summarized all of the changes. You'll see that the most significant changes have been made to the following forms: our additional as-is provisions addendum, our disclosure of inclusions, exclusions, leased items, and utilities addendum, our 4 financing addenda, which include our conventional financing addendum, our FHA financing addendum, our USDA financing addendum, and our VA financing addendum, as well as some adjustments to the language in our property inspections addendum. We also made some clerical changes, as I mentioned earlier, to a few other documents, and I'll go ahead and fast forward to those first before we go through those other documents. And as you can see, there's a section here in the summary titled Clerical Changes. You'll notice that the initial lines at the bottom of the individual pages of these documents, and there's a number of them, I'm not going to state all of them here, but you can see they're all listed here, have been removed. And the rationale for that is stated here in a practice tip. And I'll note now that contracts are ultimately formed by the parties affixing their signatures at the end of the document. Some of our documents had separate initial line spaces at the bottom of pages. These were multi-page documents generally. So if you had a 4-page document, on pages 1, 2, and 3, there would be initial lines at the bottom of pages 1, 2, and 3. And we'd frequently get calls from members, usually on our legal hotline, asking, well, what if one party forgot to initial one of the pages, but everything at the bottom was signed and dated? Well, in that instance, you still had a contract. Simply omitting one initial line at the bottom of one page should not render an entire contractual agreement null and void. Now, the only exception with this would be initials that are required to signify an express agreement within an agreement. A good example of that is in our property inspections addendum, which we'll actually be taking a look at a little bit later in this video. And of course, those initial lines remain in documents where you have such agreements within agreements. That being said, for the remaining documents, again, those listed here on page 4 of the summary, those initial lines have been removed. The other clerical change, the fillable field in the purchase price paragraphs of our residential contract of sale and our unimproved land contract of sale, that line to express the purchase price in words has been lengthened based on some member feedback. We wanted to make sure you all had enough room to state the purchase price in words. So that, you'll note, has been lengthened on those 2 forms. So now let's go ahead. We'll turn to the other changes to the other forms, starting with our additional as-is provisions addendum. And this is a pretty simple change. Paragraph B has simply been deleted from this form. That's because paragraph B purported to remove any obligation in the residential contract of sale for a seller to comply with any outstanding notices or orders of violation issued by a condominium regime or a homeowners association, if that particular property was subject to one of those types of community associations. And it came to light that, in fact, our contract of sale never required, did not have language that required a seller to comply with those orders or notices of violation. And so this language in the additional as-is provisions addendum essentially had no form or function, and so it was deleted. Bear in mind, this is a good time to plug careful review of resale packages. If you are working with a buyer who is purchasing a property that's subject to a community association, any outstanding violation notices or issues pertaining to the physical condition of the property that have been noted by the community association should be stated in that resale package. So ensure that your buyer clients are reviewing those resale packages carefully. We'll go ahead and turn to our conventional financing addendum now. And there's a few changes that were made to the financing addenda that were made across all of them. I'll go ahead and mention those now. So, for example, if there were initial lines at the bottom of individual pages of these addenda. Those have been deleted, as I mentioned earlier. This was applicable to other documents. You'll also see that we've added a field so that if a buyer desires to express loan origination or discount fees as a dollar amount rather than just as a percentage of the loan amount, there is now a field, there is now the ability to do that in the conventional financing addendum. And that is the case as well for our other financing addendum, including our FHA financing addendum. You'll see that here, our USDA financing addendum, and the VA financing addendum. Now, let's cycle back to the FHA financing addendum. Now, this change affects the FHA financing addendum, the USDA financing addendum, and the VA financing addendum. And that is adjustment to the language in our wood destroying insect inspection paragraph. Now, bear in mind that there are certain instances where FHA, USDA, and VA lenders may require a wood destroying insect inspection as a condition of approving the loan. Now, if that is the case, and buyer has not otherwise requested a wood destroying insect inspection that has been agreed to in a property inspections addendum, we wanted to ensure that the buyer had the ability to have that inspection conducted if it is in fact a condition of loan approval. Now, bear in mind, if a buyer wants the ability to negotiate repairs in connection with any potential wood destroying insect inspection damage, they really should request the ability to conduct that inspection in the property inspections addendum. Otherwise, any wood destroying insect inspection damage that is noted by a lender required inspection or the appraiser would be subject to any lender required repair provisions as stated. For example, here in the FHA financing addendum, you see lender required repairs are discussed in paragraph 7. So really, again, if a buyer is looking to have a wood destroying insect inspection conducted, they really should consider requesting that as part of the property inspections addendum, as if they are having property inspections conducted. And you'll see in our USDA financing addendum, that's stated very similarly there, as well as in our VA financing addendum. Moving on to our disclosure of inclusions, exclusions, leased items, and utilities addendum, a couple of minor changes in this form down in paragraph 3, the utilities paragraph. You'll see that an other field has been added next to the sewage disposal category, as well as space for sellers to indicate what utility service providers provide utilities to the subject property. Finally, we'll take a look at our property inspections addendum. And here we really just wanted to reinforce the existing procedure for property inspections. There's not been a material change to any procedure. Again, remember that this form was refreshed for October of 2022. And really what these changes amount to are housekeeping changes. So you'll see we changed the word of to from here to be consistent with our other forms. And here is that example of an agreement within an agreement. Here, it's required that the parties agree to every inspection that the buyer is going to conduct. So you'd be required that the buyers would initial, sellers would initial. You'd then have that agreement within the greater agreement that constitutes the contract of sale. Now, most of the changes you'll see are here in paragraph 1B, the inspection process. And what we really want to do is reinforce the new procedure, new for October 2022, that is, that the buyer has one chance to submit a written request for repairs, and that written request is going to encompass any repairs that they're requesting based on any of the inspections that they may have conducted prior to the deadline, that one deadline that we're now working off of. So you'll see this language has now changed. If the results of an inspection are unsatisfactory to the buyer may terminate the contract of sale by delivering a unilateral notice of termination under contract of sale to seller by the deadline. Buyer is not required to specify the basis of buyer's dissatisfaction. Buyer's right to terminate the contract as stated in the subsection expires at the deadline. Now, the right to terminate, as stated in the subparagraph, cannot be exercised once buyer elects to negotiate repairs and/or seller credit, as stated in subparagraph 1B2. Now, remember, let's say the deadline is 10 days from the date of contract acceptance, and buyer conducts all of their inspections by day 5, and they decide to negotiate repairs in accordance with paragraph 1B2. So they submit a property inspections notice to seller. Now, let's say on day eight, buyer decides, well, I'm not sure about that. I think I want to terminate the contract. Buyer cannot do that. They have already elected to negotiate repairs. So buyers need to be very careful about what decision they're going to make. Think of it as a fork in the road. You either elect to terminate the contract based on the results of the inspection, or you elect to negotiate repairs. Once you go down one fork in the road, you cannot turn around and go back. And that takes us right to the right to negotiate. You'll see, instead of exercising the right to terminate the contract of sale in accordance with paragraph 1B1, buyer may make a single written request for repairs and/or seller credit based upon buyer's dissatisfaction with the results of the agreed upon inspections, or inspection if only one inspection was requested. Now, this right will expire at the deadline unless the buyer delivers to seller a copy of the inspection reports together with a written request that seller make certain repairs and/or agree to provide a seller credit. The parties acknowledge that buyer's lender may need to approve any agreed upon seller credit. Now, this language is new. Should buyer attempt to deliver multiple written requests for repairs and/or seller credit to seller prior to the deadline, seller shall only be obligated to consider the first such request received. Buyer gets one written request. So all inspections that buyer wants to complete must be completed by the deadline. Buyer can then decide what repairs, if any, they want to request, and what amount of seller credit they may want to ask for. And then again, by the deadline, submit that written request. You may use the property inspections notice for that purpose, which is designed in accordance with this language. Finally, just some clarifying language in paragraph 1B3. Once seller responds to buyer's request for repairs and/or seller credit, now we're assuming that seller, for the purpose of this language, has not agreed to do everything that a buyer has requested. Should seller not agree to do everything a buyer requests, buyer has 3 options. They may terminate the contract of sale. They may accept what the seller is willing to offer, or they may continue negotiations by delivering a counteroffer to seller in accordance with section 1B4 of this addendum. And the procedure for counteroffer is stated here in section 1B4. And that's it. Those are the updates for January of 2023. Again, if you're looking for additional details, please carefully review our January 2023 summary of changes and practice tips. You also have us available on the legal hotline for more information about the hotline, a benefit that's available to all Maryland Realtors members. Please visit our website at mdrealtor.org/hotline.